Okay, novel. I compared to other novelists, I know as friends, or I know because of autobiographies or biographies of them. I am a relatively. I make plans. I'm a relatively disciplined writer who composes the whole book before beginning to execute and write it. Of course, you cannot imagine a whole novel before you write it. There are limits to human memory and imagination. Lots of things come to your mind as you write a book, but again, I make a plan, chapter, know the plot. Characters never take over. I am controlling everything. And when I'm stuck at some chapter, I skip to a chapter that I want to write. I know what will be the 13th chapter or 17th chapter. Sometimes chapters get longer, sometimes digressions, but I try to control and enjoy writing like that. I am a sailor who knows where he's sailing, rather than there is some fog, but it's so much fun, and some authors also like that, but then they don't know what the book is about. Yes, I put down in writing a chapter. In fact, I also then write chapter headings. This will happen, that will happen, some details, some lines, some things. Take notes as the novel progresses about the future chapters, about what I will write. Yes, and of course, if there is some research to be made, I do that research. I'm a disciplined writer. I think novelists should be disciplined and self-imposed, working hours. I work a lot, but not. I don't feel like I'm working. I always feel that there is a child in me, healthy, and I'm playing. So when I say I work a lot, I don't say it in a negative sense. That in fact, I say it in a stressing that I enjoy life a lot when I write, and I like it. So till the age of late 30s, when my daughter was born, I worked till 4 a.m. in the morning and woke up in the noontime, more or less like then late Dostoevsky. Then, when she was 5, I began to take my daughter to school early in the morning, then switched almost around. Now I was waking up at 5 a.m., working for 2 hours, waking up my daughter and taking to her school. And then I work, go to the office. I have an office. I need a separate place between the family or the crowd, and I write and write and write and write. Very disciplined. Yes, I'm distinctly aware of it. That I, perhaps because I am raised almost brainwashed in that way, that I have a strong opinion that I have really talent for painting, while for writing I'm troubled that I use my intellect. When I paint, I feel that I'm painting with talent. When I write, I feel that I'm writing with my intellect. When I paint, I think it's some other force making me paint. As I wrote in my novel, My Name is Red, watch with amazement what my hand is doing on the paper, what kind of line, what kind of strange, beautiful thing it's doing. In spite of my will, so to speak, I look at my hand as if it's some other person's hand. While as I write, I know that I'm writing. I'm thinking this and executing this on the paper. There is a difference. But then when I paint, I'm naive. But when I write, I'm contrived. I'm calculating. But on the other hand, well, of course, you can't write a novel without inspiration. Those moments when you think someone else is whispering you what you write. I also have these moments when I write novels, but then I revisit those sections, organize, plan, see the text through the eyes of the reader, calculate its effect. Writing a novel is a combination of both inspiration and composition, heartfelt feeling that, oh, I have talent, something is coming to me, and then calculating what will be the whole effect, being an editor of yourself, perhaps. Strongest advice would be don't ever listen to neither my advice or anyone else's advice. You find your own, follow your own humors, you will find them. Just work hard and read hard. see the visible, and make people identify with the lover's point of view. That my aim in this novel was not to put love on a pedestal and say what a sweet thing it is, what a great thing it is. On the other hand, I look at it as almost a bad thing, or a not bad thing, that something that happens to us, to all of us. Then let's try to analyze it, see through it, and see how human mind and heart, if you make a distinction between them, reacts to life. I can also simplify my point of view is that lots of things are operating in our minds, in our spirit, in our blood, so to speak, when we are in love. And one thing that is important is that one part of our mind is seeing things clearly, knows that we are in love, that what we are doing, in fact, will not serve our love, but it will be, in fact, not good for getting or impressing the beloved, but we do those things. And when we are in love, this is the essential point about my novel too, that we do things, one part of our minds observes with a bit sadness and melancholy, thinking that this will not make us happy. And this is one thing. The second thing that I focus on the novel, to see analytically all the things that lovers do, that is, waiting for the phone to ring, resentment and anger, jealousy, finding yourself stupid or over anxiety, angers, expectations, and a lot of illusions, delusions, how we cheat or how we misguide ourselves when we are in love. My character, Kemal, in Museum of Innocence, thinks that actually he is going to win over his beloved in 2 weeks, at most in 2 months, while he spends 8 years running after her. The book, at one point in the book, when my character is infatuated by love and feels what we popularly call love pain, he realizes that objects, things that are associated with his beloved, objects that they shared together in their happy times, have the power of consoling him, perhaps because they bring back the memories, the joyful memories they shared together. This we all know more or less from Proust's Madeleine, or I'll give you an example of a movie ticket. Let's imagine that we have found a movie ticket in an old jacket's pocket. We have already forgotten that we've been to that movie. We don't even remember we've seen that. But as soon as we have the ticket, we begin thinking that, well, not only that we've seen the movie, but we remember scenes from the movie. Because we have an object associated with that sensations and memories. All objects have that power, and when my character is badly in love and is not happy with his unrequited love, he begins to collect or gather around the objects that he had shared with his beloved. Later, when after some time, he makes a museum of these objects, and my novel is in a way annotated museum catalog. If you put the objects together and tell the story of each object, we have a novel. That was more or less the idea how I composed this book. Then I'm also doing that. I'm also doing the museum. Maybe I should talk about later when, more when my museum is also about objects that these lovers share, but also it's a city museum because they share the culture of Istanbul between 1975 until the end of 20th century. It has also qualities of a city museum. I argue that collecting things is related to getting attached to things is an universal human reaction to some trouble, trauma, whatever you may call it. In my novel, it is, of course, love. And my infatuated lover is so troubled that he gets attached to things for various reasons. This is more or less the common passion in all collectors. But it is only the Western civilization that put a collective collectors' mania into a pedestal because museums were invented in West. First, there were in 17th, 18th century what they called Wunderkammer or cabinets of curiosities to exhibit the power and taste of the princes or the elites or the rich people. Then, when Louvre was converted into from a royal palace to a public sphere, a museum, then again it was a place for showing the power and sophistication of the ruling elites. But museums are also places for learning. You put together things, then you categorize, and you produce information. Human information are in fact contained in things and in the theory about the relationships. Once you put two or three, five objects in an exhibit in a museum, these objects tell a story. You ask yourself, if you visit it, what's the relationship between them? And that's a story. That's a theory. Museums put collectors on a pedestal, and making collections, getting attached to things is not an embarrassing thing once museums legitimize your habit of collecting. But if there are no museums, then your habit of collecting and also your collection exhibits only your personal wounds. So I made this distinction towards the end of my Museum of Innocence, when my character, after my character decides to exhibit his immense collection that are related to his love. And my character also visits small museums of the world, 5,000 of them, perhaps because he likes them. He likes the empty, melancholic, old museums where no one goes, and I've been to so many of them all over the world just because I like the atmosphere inside, the melancholy atmosphere, the creaking of the parquet floor, the museum guides almost half sleepy. Even they're also impressed that you're here and looking at these objects no one comes for. There you feel the venture of a prince, a rich guy, a sad guy, a poor collector who thought that he would transcend history by his collection, by his objects. But then it's half successful. No one comes. You feel that outside there is a time, modern times that's going on, while inside the museum it's timelessness. These sensations I like. In fact, in the end, we write novels that because we just like these sensations, we want to immerse ourselves to these images. I liked, in fact, at the heart of the novel, or one part of the novel, is that I very much like to go out to forgotten, neglected museums of the world. And one of the reasons I wrote this novel was just to revisit them, to see them, to talk about them. Oh, okay, I mentioned them. For example, Museo Bagatti Valsecchi in Milano. One of the sources of my museum was, in fact, when the book was published in Italy, I went there, had a reading there, and trying to highlight the museum, because this was a museum done in mid-19th century by two Italian aristocrats to represent 15th, 14th century Renaissance life in Italy. They had bought all the things, Renaissance things, from flea markets because they were cheap and available at that time, and converted their own homes into a museums. But then they were using these museum objects, old objects, and real objects from Renaissance as their daily life objects. And I like museums where people think about their afterlife, their life after death, and slowly and slowly, before their life, convert their homes into museums. There are places like that. For example, Musée Gustave Moreau in Paris. Gustave Moreau, I think, is a classicistic, a bit kitschy painter, not a great painter, but an interesting figure. Proust mentioned so many writers. André Malraux, surrealists were influenced by him. Why? Because, not because of the quality of his paintings, I think, but because of the idea of his museums. He comes from a well-to-do family. And towards the end of his life, he converted his studio, the house his family lived all along for years, into a museum, calculating that after his death, his studio and house will be a museum. And he was successful in that. Just because his museum was successful, we still know the name Gustav Moro. Um, it, it plays out most in cultural politics and politics in general. Have always been conservative parties in Turkey who stress the Islamic identity, and there have always been secularist party who stress out the Occidentalist aspirations of the nation. These clash. First, they are more visible in political public sphere than daily life. In daily life, I live in Istanbul, which is based just has space both in Asia and Europe. Then you cross every day from Asia. Only tourists pay attention to it. It's like going from Manhattan to Brooklyn, and no one says I'm going from Asia to Europe. It's just everyday life. People do not pay attention to really in their daily lives where things come from. In fact, I argue in all my books. Yes, I dramatize East-West. You may call it clash, or I would say it a harmony. You don't pay attention. It's just there, and things come from different sources to form a new thing. That is Istanbul. That is my culture. I don't underline the clash part of East-West. I underline how harmoniously, without self-consciously, with a lack of self-consciousness, things come together. It's the politicians or journalists who impose East-West and say clash. Not necessarily, civilizations don't necessarily clash. Most of the time, they come together. And people who promote the idea of clash then pave way for real clash and human suffering. It's a feeling of being at the periphery, not under Western eyes, in our own way of life. But that is also changing. When I started writing 30 years ago, no one cared about Turkish culture or Turkish writers. But now, Turkey is getting on the agenda. I like being out of the scene. The feeling of not living at the center of the world is a nice feeling. I complain about Turkey's being provincial, but I confess, like being in provincial, enjoy being out of the drama, enjoy being non-Western, etc. No, and in fact, there is joy about that. Don't forget that the greatest book about any city, a novel, Ulysses, was written by James Joyce in Trieste. In fact, you love it. You like that there is a sweet taste of longing when you write when you're away. And my black book, which is book that I find my voice, I wrote it more than half of it in New York, dreaming of Istanbul, just like, and I've always identified with James Joyce living in Trieste, dreaming of Dublin. That's no problem. Well, it may be. Maybe I am like that, perhaps, but I don't identify that with myself with that concept. That when I was that we should address all humanity. That writers should transcend the national audience. I agree with. In fact, it is a moral uh, um, obligation to not to write for the national audience, and it also makes you shift your point of view. But on the other hand, global writer is not, aesthetically something I like. I don't want to refer to myself as such. I think you're correct when you say that it's declining after 2005. The reason for this are various, but if you want to blame parties, we have to blame conservatives of Europe and conservatives and nations of Turkey, that these parties didn't want to see Turkey in European Union, especially in France and Germany, conservatives, and in Turkey, secularist conservatives, and some Islamists did not want to see Turkey join Europe, and they tried to block it and successfully block it. The situation is not as sunny as it was in 2005. In fact, at that time, some optimistic Turkish newspapers predicted that Turkey will be joining in Europe in 10 years, nothing of the sort happened. In fact, there was no development and the idea faded away a bit. I'm sad about it, but I'm not going to cry about it either. In the end, I'm a novelist. I continue writing my novels. Good. Turkish book industry is booming. No one, you would not be intimidated by free speech problems if you write a novel. Don't forget that Dostoevsky or Tolstoy wrote their novels when Tsar was reading and censoring. You won't, most of the time, you won't get in trouble for writing a novel. But political commentary, journalistic writing, outspoken Kurds, radicals, they are always in trouble. But what free speech is, novels will not put you in trouble of free speech, but yes, political commentary, criticizing radically army, criticizing religion, so many things will still put you in trouble in Turkey. Sometimes legal problem, sometimes media campaigns, death threats kind of problem. Look, I don't want to see heroes around. I believe in a world where there are no heroes, and I've read and know humanity a lot. There are moments that I admire in a person: courage, intellect, hard work. These are the qualities I admire in an intellectual, in a writer, and there are so many people who have these things. Say, I admire Noam Chomsky, or say, I used to admire when I was a teenager, Jean-Paul Sartre. I like outspoken public intellectuals, but on the other hand, then I also see their failures, their vanities. They're all human beings. My policy of looking at intellectuals, and they are most of the time people I admire, is that pay attention to what they did best and ignore their failures, because they all fail. We are intellectuals, writers, in the end, say something interesting and pay attention to what they say. Then there are also uninteresting things they say or just their failures. I don't care about that. That will it, is it beautiful? Is it good enough? Is that chapter good? Now, unfortunately, will the museum be good enough? Is it good? It's always the idea that self-criticism worries me. Most of the time, when I'm deep in my, is it good enough? Is it interesting enough? Am I telling the truth? Am I authentic, or am I posing? This kind of thing upsets me. I'm very worried about being pretentious or inauthentic, or just writing for the sake of writing. Though I am also a graphomaniac, I write all the time. Whenever I have a nervousness, a tension, I pull out a notebook and write some things in it. I like that, and it calms me down. Sometimes I draw, sometimes I write, and that makes me happy.